I never imagined, not even in my worst nightmares, that my own son and daughter-in-law would have me dragged into a psychiatric ward, a place where I spent weeks drowning in humiliation. Surrounded by patients who had lost themselves, I could feel my own sanity slipping inch by inch. So I'm sure you're wondering if I truly came that close to losing my mind. How am I still sitting here clear-headed telling you this story? If you're curious, then make sure you subscribe, like, and share this video to support me. And don't forget to comment and tell me where you're listening from. I still remember the cold sting of the stretcher under my back as the paramedics wheeled me out of my own front yard. The night air smelled of damp pavement and the distant hum of the highway, and for a moment I thought I was dreaming, because nothing made sense. My daughter-in-law Emma was standing by the porch, with her hands pressed dramatically to her face, letting out these shaky sobs that sounded practiced more than pained. She kept telling the paramedics that her mother-in-law had lost control and had attacked her, and that she had feared for her life. I tried to sit up, to tell them that none of that was true, but a firm hand pushed my shoulder back down. One of the paramedics murmured that I needed to stay still for my own safety. Safety. Funny how that word becomes sharp when someone else decides its meaning for you. Just then, my son Mason came running down the driveway, still rolling his suitcase from the airport. His face was pale with confusion and exhaustion. He had barely stepped off a plane, and already Emma had sent him a video earlier that evening showing me pacing the hallway, looking frantic, while strange noises echoed in the background. I had been trying to find the source of those sounds, but she told him it was proof I was unstable. When he looked at me that night, his eyes did not hold the steady warmth I used to know. He stood beside his wife and said that maybe I needed help and that everything was going to be all right. I wanted to scream that nothing was all right and that he was believing a lie, but the siren started and swallowed my voice. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like insects, and Emma followed us inside with a calmness that chilled me more than the night wind. She pretended to sniffle as she handed the attending nurse a folder she claimed was my medical file. It was filled with notes from a doctor she had bribed, saying I suffered from auditory hallucinations and aggressive episodes. My hands trembled when I saw my name typed under those accusations. I kept telling them that the noises I heard at home were real and that someone had been creating them to torment me, but every face around me softened in that pitying way people reserve for the elderly who are slipping away. Emma had already planted the perfect picture of confusion and decline. I tried again to explain that someone was manipulating the environment in my house, but the nurse only patted my arm and said I should rest. Mason stood in the doorway with his jaw tight, torn between doubt and duty, and I felt something inside me sag under the weight of being disbelieved by my own child. The next morning, they transferred me to the psychiatric facility. And in that moment, as the doors locked behind me, I wondered if maybe I truly had lost my mind. I have lived most of my adult life inside the quiet rhythm of a house that never demanded more than what I could give. For 40 years, I was a full-time homemaker beside my gentle husband, and when he passed, he left me this small house with the peeling white fence, an old but dependable sedan, and the retirement savings we built slowly through decades of careful budgeting. After his death, the silence in the house became something I learned to live with. I stopped attending neighborhood gatherings, and I never bothered with social media. I kept my world small and predictable because it felt safe. My money was divided between a regular bank account and a fixed-term savings account that renewed every 6 months. I never thought much about it. It was simply how my husband and I had always managed our future. Later, I would learn it was exactly the kind of stability Emma had been looking for. The neighbors liked me because I baked more than I could ever finish alone, and I often carried a small basket of muffins or cornbread to the houses next door. I never meant to win anyone's affection. I just liked the warmth of sharing, and it made the quiet days less heavy. Those neighbors would later become the most honest witnesses in a story I never imagined would involve me. Every evening, I wrote down my expenses in a small notebook I kept beside the lamp in the living room. Groceries, gasoline, a new spatula, $2 for the thrift store book stand. It was a habit I had built years ago when our income was tight. I also kept every receipt in an old tin box, decorated with faded strawberries. I never knew that one day that box would turn into a timeline strong enough to challenge lies spoken about me. Emma learned about these habits almost immediately. At first, she pretended to find them charming. Later, I realized she had been studying me, watching the exact ways I organized my life. She even asked me once if I ever slept through the night, because she noticed my living room light often stayed on until after midnight. I told her I liked reading in bed, and that sometimes my books carried me too far into the night. I did not know she was filing that bit of information away, preparing to twist it into something darker. My health had always been steady. No history of confusion or anxiety. No medication other than the occasional vitamin. I drove myself to the grocery store every week and chatted with the cashier I had known for years. I was as lucid as any woman my age could be, and everyone who knew me could see that clearly. Life only began to shift after Emma started visiting more often. She would linger in rooms while pretending to tidy up. She would ask innocent questions about my routines. I thought she was trying to bond with me. I did not understand that she was mapping out the edges of my life so she could begin pushing them out of place. Mason has always lived in a world that moved faster than he could ever hold on to. As the operations director of a large logistic company, he spent more time in airports than in his own living room. His suitcase was always half-packed, and his phone never stopped buzzing. There were weeks when he crossed 3 states in 4 days and barely had time to sleep between meetings and facility inspections. Because of that, he was almost never home when something strange happened around my house. Emma knew it well. Every time he asked if everything was all right, she would smile softly and tell him that his mother was fine and that he should focus on work. He trusted her because she had spent years perfecting the role of the devoted wife who held the household together. While he rushed through terminals and hotel lobbies, Emma slowly built a different story. She sent him cheerful pictures of the two of us sitting in the backyard or having coffee at my kitchen table. She wrote sweet little notes about how much she enjoyed spending time with me and how lucky the family was to have such a gentle mother. I did not know she was curating those images for him like evidence in a trial I did not know I was part of. Behind his back, she sprinkled comments that felt harmless at first. Things like, "Maybe your mom forgot where she put her keys again," or "She seemed a bit tired today," or "Age can sneak up on people without warning." Mason heard these things and tucked them away with a quiet worry he never shared. One evening before one of his long trips, she gently suggested that he sign a temporary authorization form so she could help manage my finances if something urgent happened while he was away. She said it in such a calm, caring tone that even I might have believed her intentions were good. Mason did not think twice. He had grown up watching his father hand every responsibility to him with pride. So he signed the paper and unknowingly opened the exact legal door Emma would later push wide open. Mason had once knelt beside his father's hospital bed and promised he would always take care of me. Those words lived inside him like a weight he carried every day. So when Emma later whispered that I was not well, he felt shame before he felt doubt. He wanted so badly to make up for every missed dinner, every forgotten birthday, every week he spent on the road while I lived alone in this quiet house. Believing her felt like a way to honor the promise he had failed to keep. Emma understood that better than he did. She used his guilt like a lever, gently pushing him toward agreement every time she suggested a new step to help me. And he followed her because he wanted to be a good son. Only later, when the truth finally rose to the surface, would Mason realize how deeply he had been used. And the grief in his eyes then would be heavier than any shame I could have placed on him. Emma grew up in an ordinary world, but she never accepted that truth. She wanted shine instead of simplicity, and she chased it with a hunger that felt almost desperate. On her Instagram, she posed with handbags that looked like luxury, but were quietly bought from discount websites. She filmed herself stirring pots of soup and smiling into the camera as if she had cooked everything from scratch, even though the containers from the deli sat in the trash outside. She wanted to be a micro-influencer so badly that she began building a version of herself that glittered with a perfection she did not have in real life. When she noticed the steady comfort of my home and the quiet security of the savings my husband and I left behind, something in her shifted. The desire to impress became something sharper, something with teeth. Online, she began weaving small stories about me. She wrote that her mother-in-law was forgetful and lonely, and sometimes seemed lost. She made short videos pretending to help me find my glasses or filming the hallway, while whispering that I had left the stove on. None of those things ever happened. But her viewers did not know that. They saw a sweet young woman caring for an elderly mother-in-law who appeared confused. Some even sent her advice that fed into the picture she was painting. She saved those comments and later showed them to Mason as proof that others had noticed I was declining. I did not even know she was using the internet to craft a reputation for me before I ever realized I was the target. Before marrying my son, she had worked at a spa where she met many people, including a doctor who lived under constant financial strain. Emma saw weakness the way sharks smell blood. She slipped him money and asked him to adjust a psychological report under my name. I would later learn that the file said I suffered from mood instability and auditory confusion. She kept a printed copy in her purse, ready to unfold the moment anyone hesitated to believe her. That single document sat between me and my freedom for far too long, until the day lawyer Shane tore it apart, piece by piece. What frightened me most was how carefully she studied my personal life. I once walked into the room and found my laptop awake even though I had already shut it down. At the time, I ignored it. Later, I learned she had been checking my bank emails and attempting to reroute transaction notifications to an address she controlled. She saw the size of my savings and the existence of my fixed-term account. Even Mason did not know the details of that account because I had always handled our household finances with quiet independence. When Emma discovered that money her ambitions hardened, she no longer wanted to be simply admired. She wanted ownership of the life I had built, and to reach it, she needed me out of the way. I did not know when the first sound began. It was a faint tap in the dark, like a fingertip against wood, followed by a soft rustle that seemed to crawl along the wall. At the time, I thought it was the old house settling, or maybe a squirrel on the roof. Later, I learned Emma had planted a device no larger than my thumb behind the antique cabinet in the hallway. She knew I rarely touched that cabinet. She knew I trusted the quiet corners of my home. The device released a pattern of tiny knocks and shifting noises so subtle a younger person might have ignored them. But for someone my age awake alone at 2 a.m, the sounds felt sharp and wrong. It repeated at the exact same hour every night because she programmed it that way. I would lie in bed holding my breath as the noise came again and again, and I could not place where it came from. It was not loud enough to justify waking Mason in another state. It was not clear enough to show anyone else. It simply existed in the space between fear and doubt, where no one could prove anything. Emma understood exactly what she was doing. The sounds were small enough to escape easy detection, but irritating enough to keep me from falling back asleep. The longer I stayed awake, the more drained I felt the next day. And the more tired I became, the easier it was for her to point a camera at me and catch a moment where I rubbed my temples or spoke sharply without meaning to. She collected those moments like seeds and planted them into the story she wanted the world and Mason to believe. She even bought a second device in case I found the first one. One stayed behind the cabinet, and the other hid beneath the sofa where the shadows under the frame swallowed everything. When the battery died on one, the other kept clicking and rustling. It created the illusion that the noise was moving from room to room. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed one night, thinking the sound had followed me. I thought something inside this house was shifting in ways I could not understand. Emma later adjusted the controller so the sounds appeared even when I closed my eyes for a short nap in the afternoon. It wore me down until my hands shook when I reached for a glass of water, and my thoughts felt scattered like loose pages. I started forgetting what time I had gone to bed or whether I had shut the back door. The house that used to hold my memories now felt like a stranger breathing beside me. By the time Mason and the medical team saw me, I was exhausted and overwhelmed. And that was exactly what allowed the doctor she bribed to believe the lies she placed in front of him. I remember the night I finally broke down and called my sister. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Hannah picked up on the first ring. I told her everything in a rambling, breathless way, the noises in the walls, the sleepless nights, the way Emma watched me with a strange stillness. When I finished, there was a pause. Then Hannah said, "Keep the lights on while you sleep. I am coming tomorrow." Her voice was steady, the way it had always been since we were children. Hannah has never been the type to believe in odd coincidences or ghost stories. She is practical to the bone, and years of working in health insurance taught her exactly how medical files could be twisted if someone wanted them to be. She listened without interrupting, and I knew from the weight in her silence she already suspected someone was manipulating me. That call became the beginning of the thin thread that would later pull me out of the darkness I was sinking into. She drove through the night, crossing state lines with nothing but a travel mug of coffee and the fierce determination she carried everywhere she went. When she arrived, she walked into my house with her coat still on and hugged me so tightly I almost cried from the relief of being believed. In her tote bag, she had a stack of notebooks, a mini recorder, and a small black journal where she kept important contacts. Inside the cover was a folded paper with the number of attorney Shane Gallagher. That slip of paper would eventually become my lifeline. Hannah stayed with me for a few nights, and on the second night, as we sat in the dim living room, the sound came. A soft tapping from somewhere behind the wall, then a faint rustle like fabric brushing the floor. Hannah lifted her head immediately, her eyes sharp. She listened again and nodded. The noise came at the exact same minute it had the night before. She whispered, "This is not natural, Olivia. Someone is doing this to you." The truth of her words split something open inside me. I felt tears rising, not because I was afraid, but because finally someone else heard it. I was not losing my mind. I had simply been alone. Over the next days, she watched Emma whenever she visited. She noticed the way Emma lingered near certain corners of the house, the way she scanned the room when she thought no one was watching. Hannah did not know yet what device was hidden or where, but she knew one thing with certainty. Someone was trying to break me down. Then her world cracked open. Her husband collapsed at home from a stroke, and she had to leave in a rush. She packed her things with trembling hands and apologized over and over as if she were abandoning me. Before she left, she slipped a small folded note into the pocket of my coat. When I found it later that night, it held 2 phone numbers, hers and attorney Shane's, and beneath them, a single line: "If anything happens, call immediately." That little note stayed tucked against my heart in the days that followed. Later, when the doors of the psychiatric ward locked behind me, it would become the only bridge back to my own life. I knew the house would feel different when Hannah left, but I did not expect it to turn against me so quickly. The first morning after she drove away, Emma arrived with a bright smile and a container of soup she said she had made herself. I did not think much of it. I was still shaken from the strange nights and too tired to argue. What I did not know was that Emma had already prepared a mixture of crushed melatonin and a travel sickness medicine she could buy at any drugstore without leaving a trace. She ground them into a fine powder and stirred them into my broth until it disappeared completely. She knew the doses were small enough to escape routine medical tests, yet strong enough to blur the edges of my awareness if taken often. Within a few days, my energy felt as if it had been drained through my fingertips. I moved slower, and sometimes my thoughts stumbled before reaching my mouth. Once, while reheating a pan, I walked away for a moment and forgot to turn off the stove. Emma appeared exactly then, as if she had been waiting, and she lifted her phone to film me staring at the burner in confusion. She told me it was for my own safety, but I could feel the judgment beneath her soft tone. I did not know she had already posted stories online about my forgetfulness, and now she had the perfect recording to match her tale. The nights grew harder. I woke up feeling heavy, as if my mind belonged to someone else. Headaches crawled behind my eyes. I could not sleep more than an hour at a time. Every symptom matched the narrative Emma had planted weeks earlier on her social media pages. People who had never met me believed I was unraveling, and their comments fed her confidence. I felt myself shrinking inside my own life. Emma began testing the limits of my patience. She made small remarks that sounded harmless on the surface, yet pierced in ways I could not explain. She said things like, "I wonder if you remember what you were trying to tell me, or you sound a bit strange today." Each time I hesitated even slightly, she raised her phone as if she were harvesting evidence. I could feel myself changing, and I hated that I did not know why. My frustration made her job easier. When I snapped at her once, she stepped back with a wounded expression and whispered that she was only trying to help. Behind my back, she contacted a doctor she used to know from her spa days, the kind of man who carried more debt than pride. She sent him a message asking if the symptoms she described sounded like behavioral decline in an elderly woman. He replied that Olivia might need mental evaluation. He wrote the words so casually, as if stamping a label on a box. Emma saved the message and stored it with her growing collection of false proof. It became another stone in the foundation she was building, a legal path to place me somewhere she could control me completely. She smiled at me so gently in those days, and I never felt so unsafe in my own home. I did not notice the tiny camera at first. Emma tucked it into the corner of the living room shelf, behind a framed photo of my husband and me. It was no bigger than a walnut, and pointed directly at the spot where I often sat when the medicine she had slipped into my meals began to dull my thoughts. The device was linked straight to her phone so she could watch me even when she was not in the house. I later learned she saved the moments when I moved slowly or stared into space as if my mind had slipped away. She took those pieces and arranged them into a small video that looked like I was losing control of myself. She sent that video to Mason while pretending to shake with worry. In the message, she wrote that she was afraid his mother might be struggling with something serious, and she was scared I could accidentally harm myself. She told him she only wanted to help me find a place where I could receive the best care. Mason, who already carried guilt from years of traveling for work, believed every word. He did not question the video or wonder why it showed only fragments of my day. That was the moment he began standing beside his wife without checking the truth first. Emma whispered more lies each time she had the chance. She told Mason that I locked myself in my room for hours, which was not true. She told him I talked to myself often, which was only me repeating shopping lists when I felt overwhelmed. When Mason called to check on me, I answered with a tired, shaky voice because the medicine and the fear were already wearing me down. Hearing me like that only pushed him deeper into worry. Emma leaned close to him and murmured that my voice was proof something was wrong. Mason began to search online for places that cared for elderly people who needed help. I could feel the distance forming between us each time he spoke to me, as if he was afraid I might break. Emma used his fear like a tool. She asked him if she could take me for a full evaluation so that a doctor could give professional guidance. Mason agreed quickly, believing it was the responsible thing to do. He never knew the doctor she planned to visit had already been prepared through messages she sent weeks earlier. Emma moved through each step calmly, as if she were following a checklist. She acted gentle, concerned patient, while her plans closed around me like the slow tightening of a trap. I saw the changes in Mason's tone each time he called. He sounded careful, almost distant, and I could hear Emma in the background breathing softly, as if she were waiting to claim the final piece of proof she needed. The sadness in his voice hurt more than the fear itself. I did not understand how everything had shifted so fast, or why I felt like I was becoming someone unrecognizable, and I did not know that the next step would be the one that pulled me out of my own life entirely. I remember that evening far too clearly because it felt like the moment my own home turned its back on me. Emma arrived just before sunset, carrying a pot of stew she insisted on cooking for us. I already knew she had been slipping something into my food for days, but I did not know she had chosen a dish that triggered a mild allergy I had mentioned once years ago. Within minutes of tasting it, my chest felt tight, my skin flushed, and a dull ache pulsed behind my eyes. Emma stepped closer, acting overly attentive, touching my arm too often, speaking in a hushed, frantic way that only made my nerves crack harder. I told her I needed space, that I did not feel well, and that she should go home. My voice rose sharper than I intended because exhaustion and the headache were eating away at me. That was the moment she had been waiting for. She reached into her bag and turned on her phone camera, deliberately, holding it high enough for anyone to see. She stepped back and let her breath hitch in a dramatic way. Then she shouted, "Stop! Please stop! Do not hit me! I am scared," even though I had not moved from my chair. Her voice echoed across the yard, and I heard a neighbor's door open. Someone stood on their porch, watching from a distance, unable to hear clearly, but close enough to witness the staged panic. I felt the room tilt around me. I did not understand why she was lying so boldly. Emma dialed Mason with trembling hands, though her eyes looked dry and calculating. She cried into the phone, telling him that his mother had lost control and was trying to throw things at her. Mason's voice came through frantic and confused, begging her to stay safe and call for help. When she hung up the call, her expression hardened into something cold, something triumphant. She knew Mason had believed her without hesitation. Then she called the paramedics. Her voice became steady and professional as she told them her mother-in-law was displaying dangerous behavioral symptoms and might harm herself or others. The words "adult in crisis" were enough to trigger an automatic emergency response. When the paramedics arrived, she played the frightened caregiver clinging to her story while pointing subtly at me. I stood there confused, drained, and unable to process how quickly everything had spiraled. The neighbors who had gathered looked uncertain, as if they wanted to understand, but did not know what they had heard. I tried to explain that I was simply overwhelmed and that nothing had happened, but my voice sounded weak and scattered because my head was still pounding from whatever she had slipped into my food. One of the paramedics lowered his voice and told me they only wanted to make sure I was safe. I could see they believed her more than they believed me. The world around me blurred with blue lights and urgent footsteps, and Emma's staged trembling. That night was the final step of her plan. Every piece she had laid one by one now locked into place. And as they led me toward the ambulance doors, I felt the chilling truth settle inside me. I was no longer fighting confusion. I was fighting someone who wanted me erased. The first cold wind of the season slipped through the narrow hospital window on a gray morning, and that was the day they decided I needed a winter coat. A nurse I did not know walked in with a plastic bag and placed it on the bed. She said that my family had sent over my things and that I should look through them. Her voice was polite but distant, the kind of tone people use when they already believe something about you. When she left, I sat on the edge of the mattress and pulled the coat out of the bag. It was my old dark blue one, the one I used to wear on grocery trips in late fall. For a moment, I just held it and tried to remember what it felt like to walk outside without someone watching me. I began folding the sleeves when I heard a strange rustling sound from the pocket. My first thought was that the noise was in my head again, another trick of the mind they insisted I was losing. For a second, I froze, afraid that if I investigated and found nothing, it would confirm their word hallucination. My hand hovered over the pocket while my heart beat hard in my chest. I told myself to breathe, that fabric does not make sounds without a reason. Slowly, I slid my hand inside the pocket. My fingers brushed against something rough and folded. I pinched it and pulled it out. It was a small piece of paper worn soft at the edges, as if someone had handled it many times before hiding it. In that instant, a memory pushed through the fog. Hannah hugging me in the doorway, her arms tight, her body shaking with worry, before she rushed back across state lines. I had felt her hand at my shoulder, then quick and deliberate, but my mind had been too full to understand. Now it clicked into place. On one side of the paper were 2 phone numbers. Next to them were the names Hannah Anderson and attorney Shane Gallagher, written in her familiar, uneven handwriting. Beneath that, she had added a short line telling me to call if I ever needed help and not to trust anyone except her and Shane. The letters wavered as if her hand had trembled, but the shape of each curve was so familiar that my chest opened with relief. Tears came before I could stop them. For the first time since the ambulance doors closed on my street, I did not feel completely abandoned. I knew the staff searched belongings often. Anything that looked suspicious could be taken and added to a report that would follow me like a shadow. I folded the paper again and slipped it deep into the lining of the coat, pushing it through a small tear near the inner seam so it rested between fabric layers. If anyone checked my pockets, they would find nothing. I understood that I had to move carefully now. Any sign that I was planning something would become another line in a file that already spoke for me without my consent. For the first time in weeks, a thin line of light cut through the heavy cloud in my mind. Hannah had seen through Emma before any of us. She had prepared this escape route while I was still trying to convince myself I was not losing my grip on reality. Now I had proof that someone believed me, and a way to reach a man whose job was to turn truth into protection. Still, I also knew that every inch of this place was observed. Cameras, charts, watchful eyes. One mistake, one desperate move, and Emma would win. So I pressed the coat to my chest, wiped my face, and told myself that from this moment on, every thought and every action had to be as quiet and precise as a needle passing through cloth. I learned very quickly that in this place, even something as simple as making a phone call felt like planning an escape. There was one public phone booth at the end of the hallway, a square of scratched glass, and a metal handset chained to the wall. Patients were only allowed to call family at certain hours, and only if a nurse approved it. I waited until the afternoon rounds when the shift changed and the nurses were distracted with paperwork. I approached the desk slowly and told them I needed to call my health insurance to verify my records. It was the safest excuse I could think of, something no one would question too much. One of the nurses nodded without really looking at me. She said to make it quick and walked a few steps away to help someone else. The second she turned her back, I slipped into the booth and pulled out the number Hannah had left me. My fingers shook so hard I had to press each button twice. I knew I had only seconds before someone noticed. My heart pounded against my ribs as if it were trying to warn me to hurry. The phone rang once, then again. I pressed the receiver tight to my ear, praying that Hannah would pick up before anyone came. Just as it rang the third time, I saw a shadow move behind the glass. A staff member appeared and pushed the door open. She told me to hang up because I did not have a scheduled calling time. Her tone was firm, but her eyes carried the same controlling suspicion everyone here seemed to share. I tried to explain that it was important and I only needed a few seconds, but the tension in my voice made her add a note in her tablet. Later, I would learn she labeled it as agitation. I asked for 10 more seconds. She refused. She reached out and gently but firmly removed the receiver from my hand and placed it back on the hook. The call cut off instantly. I did not know then that the phone had managed to send one small signal. Hannah saw a missed call from an unfamiliar number. That was all it took for her to feel something was terribly wrong. My sister does not ignore her instincts. She knew I would never call from a strange line unless I was trying to reach her through something I could not say. A woman from my shared room had been standing nearby the whole time. She was older than me, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She watched the nurse lead me back toward my bed, and later she whispered that she had heard everything. She said the woman trying to make the call is not crazy at all. She was trying to reach someone, and they would not let her. At the time, her words felt like water in a desert. I did not know then how important she would become, how her statement would give Shane a witness who had nothing to gain and nothing to lose. That small moment, just a few seconds of a ringing phone, became the spark that pushed Hannah deeper into the truth and gave me the first bit of hope in weeks. I was sitting at my kitchen table when I saw it a missed call from a number I did not recognize. It came at the exact hour Olivia was scheduled for her routine health check inside the psychiatric ward. The moment I saw it, something inside me tightened. My sister never called unknown numbers. If she had reached out this way, it meant she had no access to her phone. It meant she was trying to get to me through whatever crack she could find. I dialed the number again and again, but no one picked up. With every unanswered ring, my fear hardened into certainty. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I did not waste another second. I went straight to the number I knew could cut through red tape faster than anyone else. Shane Gallagher. Years ago, he had helped me unravel an insurance dispute, and I remembered the sharpness in his voice, the way he listened without missing a beat. When he answered, I told him everything from the strange noises Olivia had described to the way Emma hovered around her to the sudden decline in her behavior after eating meals Emma brought. I told him about the camera Emma used and the staged panic that ended with Olivia being dragged into the ambulance. Shane listened quietly, but the scratch of his pen didn't stop once. When I described the nightly sounds repeating at the exact same hour, his tone changed. He said that does not sound natural. That sounds like a timed device. Then he paused before adding, this could fall under elder abuse if someone is intentionally causing psychological harm. That is a felony. His words filled the room with a new kind of gravity. This was not just family drama, this was criminal. We moved fast after that. Shane would start by requesting access to Olivia's medical file. If there were forged notes or questionable evaluations, he would find them. Meanwhile, I would handle the physical side. Evidence from the house, receipts, devices, anything Emma might have planted. We split the plan like two halves of a bridge, one made of law, one made of truth. Shane warned me to proceed quietly. If Emma realized she was being investigated, she would erase everything. I assured him I understood, and that subtle was the only way I operated now. I thought briefly about calling Mason, but I stopped myself. He would not hear me. Not with Emma whispering grief and guilt into his ear every night. If he knew I was digging, he might tell her without meaning to. His trust in her now was frighteningly complete. So I would go alone. Back to Olivia's house. Back to the place where everything started. I ended the call with Shane, and the house fell silent. I grabbed my coat keys and a notebook. There was no turning back now. Olivia needed someone who believed her, and until she walked free again, that someone was going to be me. Shane always said that paperwork tells the truth long before people do. So the first thing he did was use every connection he had in the legal world to request a full copy of Olivia Cooper's medical file from the psychiatric facility. It arrived through a secure fax line in his office late in the afternoon. He sat down, spread the pages across his desk, and began reading with the calm precision of a man who had spent his entire career tearing apart lies. Within minutes, he saw it. The doctor's signature at the bottom of the evaluation form looked wrong. The pressure of the pen stroke was uneven, starting heavy and tapering off in a strange digital blur, as if someone had copied it from another document. The alignment was slightly off-center by a few millimeters, not enough for the untrained eye, but glaring to an attorney used to spotting fraud. More alarming was the timestamp. According to the form, the evaluation had been signed 2 days before Olivia was even brought into the hospital. That alone was a legal disaster. Shane leaned back, exhaled slowly, and whispered to himself that this was no mistake. This was intentional falsification. He turned to the patient identification numbers next. Medical files in the United States follow strict coding systems, and these codes can be cross-checked across statewide networks. When he entered the numbers into his database, Access, his screen returned an error. The primary ID matched a patient diagnosed with hallucinations at a hospital 200 miles south. The secondary note describing behavioral disturbance matched a completely different patient at a facility up north. Emma had taken pages from 2 unrelated cases and merged them into one Frankenstein record, believing no one would ever look closely enough to catch it. She did not understand how traceable medical data truly was. Shane called a colleague who specialized in elder abuse law. They went through the file line by line, confirming what he already knew. Using a fabricated psychiatric record to detain an elderly person was not just unethical. It was a felony under California law, a severe one, the kind that leads to prison, the kind that makes police judges and prosecutors move fast. With just this evidence, Shane said they could obtain a warrant to search Emma's home and devices. If she had planted anything harmful in Olivia's house, he would find it. He then phoned the hospital administrator and demanded an explanation for how a falsified record had been entered into an official medical file. His voice was controlled, but sharp enough to cut through the layers of bureaucracy. The administrator stuttered, clearly blindsided. Hospitals fear malpractice suits more than anything. The moment Shane used the words forged medical evaluation, the tone shifted completely. They promised to begin an internal review and temporarily reclassified Olivia from dangerous patient to patient under re-evaluation. It was not freedom, but it was a crack in the wall. That small shift was enough. It meant Hannah could now request limited visitation. It meant Olivia was no longer buried under the label Emma had forced on her. It meant their window had finally opened. Hannah drove back to Olivia's neighborhood with a kind of determination that made her almost vibrate behind the wheel. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. The first stop she made was the house next door, the home of a quiet couple who had always liked Olivia because she often brought them warm bread on weekends. When Hannah asked if they had ever heard anything strange lately, the wife hesitated, then said they had seen Emma coming to Olivia's house at odd hours. She added that they had a ring camera pointed toward the shared driveway and asked if Hannah wanted to look. The moment the video opened, Hannah felt the air leave her lungs. The screen showed Emma walking up the path at nearly midnight, carrying a small plastic bag. The bag was translucent enough that with a closer look, Hannah could see the dark outline of something box-shaped inside. She asked the neighbor to pause, then zoom in. When the image sharpened, Hannah saw a familiar blue and white logo printed on the side of the bag, the logo of a specialty electronics store that sold tracking devices, key fob cameras, and tiny sound emitters. Shane had mentioned that the repeating noise pattern sounded mechanical. Now, they had proof. The timestamp on the video read exactly 24 hours before Olivia heard the first mysterious noises in her home. Hannah felt a chill run down her back. This was not coincidence. It was the first solid thread tying Emma directly to the harassment Olivia had endured. The neighbor scrolled further and another clip loaded. This time, Emma approached the door in daylight, but looking around nervously. She checked up and down the street, then removed a key from her coat pocket and let herself inside the house while Olivia was clearly not home. That moment alone was enough to qualify as trespassing if Olivia had not given express permission. Hannah recorded every second on her phone. The neighbors told her something else, too. One evening while gardening, they overheard Emma on a call, her voice low but sharp with anger. She said, "If that old woman is not crazy yet, I will make her crazy." The couple had not understood what it meant at the time, but hearing it now made the entire picture fall into place. They looked horrified and promised they would testify if needed. Hannah sent everything to Shane within minutes. The videos, the timestamps, the witness statement. Shane responded almost instantly, telling her this is gold and that he could subpoena the original files through official channels. He explained that the footage would allow him to connect Emma to the electronic device purchase and to the timing of the harassment. It also supported an emergency restraining order because Emma had entered the house when Olivia was absent. For the first time since all of this began, the twist turned the story around. The evidence was no longer whispers and suspicions. It was in pixels and dates and witnesses ready to stand up. And Hannah felt for the first time that Emma was no longer the one closing in. They were. I followed Emma the moment her car pulled out of the driveway. I kept 3 vehicles behind her, just enough distance that she would never notice me in her mirrors. When she turned into a deserted parking lot behind an old strip mall, I killed my engine and slid lower in my seat. My heart hammered as I lifted my phone, zooming the camera until her figure sharpened. She stepped out slowly, eyes scanning the empty lot, then approached a man waiting beside a dented gray truck. From where I sat, I saw her hand him a thick envelope. It sagged slightly from the weight inside, too heavy to be just papers. He tucked it quickly into his jacket, and in return, handed her a small black pouch, no bigger than his palm. The way they stood close without speaking, the way both kept glancing around, told me this was not an ordinary purchase. It had the tense rhythm of a deal that needed shadows to survive. The man was rough-looking. His work boots stained his forearms covered in old grease. When he turned, the sunlight hit a tattoo on his wrist. I squinted until the image became clear. It was the logo of a pet gadget store known for selling training devices, collars, and noisemakers for animals. My pulse jumped. I lifted my phone and captured the license plate of his truck before he drove off. Later, I used the DMV's public inquiry site, perfectly legal under state law, to look up the registration. His record came up instantly. Prior arrest for selling unregistered electronic devices. This was no coincidence. Emma remained in the lot after he left. I stayed silent and watched as she opened the pouch and peeked inside. Even from a distance, I could see the circular shape of something no bigger than a thumb. It matched perfectly with Shane's description of the timed noise emitter. Then she opened a second container, a small white box holding a bottle of unmarked pills. My stomach tightened. This was not just harassment. She was actively drugging my sister. When Emma returned to her car, I waited until she pulled out, then followed at a safe distance. She drove straight to a park near the edge of town, stopping in a parking space facing a row of trees. I parked several rows back and watched her lean forward over her steering wheel, typing rapidly on her phone. She lifted the screen close to the glass to shield it from sunlight, and for a brief second, I caught a reflection in her windshield. I raised my phone and snapped a photo. Later, zooming in, I saw the words that made my entire body go cold. She had typed a message to someone unnamed. It said, "This afternoon, I will make sure the old woman gets more stressed." The phrasing was casual, calculated like she had done it many times. It was the clearest admission I had seen yet. I stayed low in my seat, gripping my phone so hard my fingers ached. Everything was falling into place. Every warning Olivia had whispered. Every suspicion I had ignored at first. Emma was not just manipulating, she was orchestrating. And now I had the evidence to prove it. I did not know exactly when the truth began to shift in my favor, but it must have started on the afternoon Mason visited attorney Shane Gallagher. I only learned about it later yet. When I look back, I can almost feel the moment when the walls around me loosened a little, even though I was still trapped inside that cold facility. While I sat in a room that smelled of bleach, Mason was handing over every message Emma had ever sent him about me. He believed he was helping evaluate my mental health, but really, he was opening the first crack in the story Emma built to suffocate me. When Shane told me later what he discovered, I felt like air returned to my chest for the first time in weeks. He had taken the messages and sorted them by time. Then he placed them beside the neighborhood Ring camera footage. The comparison told the truth more clearly than anything I could have said. Emma had written that I wanted to hit her, that she feared I might harm myself, that she looked at me and I did not recognize her. She made me sound like a wild animal trapped in my own skin. But the camera showed her walking out of my house, calmly swinging her purse, pausing only to check her makeup in her car window. Not once did she look threatened. Hearing this made something in me tremble. For so long, she had twisted every weakness she could find in me. My grief, my age, my loneliness. She fed those lies to Mason until he believed I was slipping into madness. Now, line by line, those lies were collapsing under their own weight. Shane told me he studied one message in particular. Emma had sent Mason a picture of a psychiatric evaluation claiming I was unstable. He enlarged the photo and saw the signature sitting crooked and blurred at the edges. He contacted the doctor whose name appeared in the corner. The man said he had never met me, not once. That moment alone should have frightened me, but instead, I felt a heavy calm settle inside me. It meant I was not imagining the cruelty around me. It meant someone finally saw it too. Shane explained that falsifying medical documents to remove an elderly person from her home is a serious crime in California, a felony. Enough for an arrest. Enough to bring everything Emma had done into the light where she could not twist it anymore. I sat on my narrow bed in the facility and listened to his words as if they were warm hands steadying my shoulders. He said Mason had begun to doubt Emma. He said the pieces were falling into place. For the first time since the ambulance doors closed on me that night, I felt something returning. A small but steady certainty. I was not losing my mind. I was getting it back. I did not know exactly what Hannah was doing while I was locked inside that cold hospital. But later, when she told me the story herself, I felt as if I had lived it through her eyes. She said she waited until Emma posted one of her perfect spa updates. I could see it in my mind, the carefully angled photo meant to convince the world she was somewhere peaceful, while she was really busy destroying my life. The moment Hannah saw that post, she grabbed her keys and drove straight to my house. When she told me this part, I felt a tight ache in my chest because she acted faster for me than I had ever acted for myself. She said she unlocked my door quietly and stepped inside. I imagined her standing in the dim light of my hallway, surrounded by the home I had once felt safe in. Then she heard it. The same faint tapping that had made me doubt my sanity for weeks. Hearing that she heard it too made my entire body warm because it meant I had not imagined anything. She walked slowly from room to room, and she told me she felt a sharp chill go through her when the sound repeated in a perfect rhythm. She said she knew at that moment it had to be a device. When she described how she leaned near the painting and heard a vibration behind it, I could almost feel her steady breath. She removed the frame and saw a tiny object stuck to the wall blinking with a small, cruel light. I remember closing my eyes when she told me this because I had stood in that very hallway so many times, begging myself to stay calm. The thought that something was planted there on purpose made my hands shake even as I listened. She recorded everything. The blinking light, the glue marks, the serial number printed on the side. Then she kept searching. I could hear the slight tremble in her voice when she said she found the second device under the sofa. That detail hit me deeply because it meant Emma never made a mistake. She had planned for my doubt, for my age, for the exhaustion she knew I would feel. She had set traps, layered one over another until I no longer trusted my own mind. Hannah told me she sent the videos to Shane immediately. She said he called back almost at once, his voice steady and sharp with purpose. She told me he said this was the turning point, that the devices proved my fear had not been madness, but sabotage. As she spoke, I felt my breath loosen in my chest in a way it had not for weeks. I had spent so much time thinking I was drowning in confusion, but the truth had been sitting in my walls all along. When Hannah finished recounting it, I felt something gentle settle in me. I was not slipping away. Someone had been twisting the world around me, and now the world was twisting back in my favor. I remember sitting on the thin mattress in that quiet facility, feeling as if time had stopped around me while Hannah and Shane were outside gathering every piece of truth that would later become my shield. They told me everything slowly, gently, as if they knew my heart could only hold so much at once. Shane asked Hannah to record a full legal-style video, and he insisted she start with the date and the hour, so nothing could ever be questioned later. She walked through my house with her camera, raised her steps steady, recording the untouched rooms, the shadows in the corners, the faint ringing that still pulsed through the walls. When she told me this, I felt my breath catch, because someone finally heard what I had been hearing all along. She filmed the device behind my painting, the small blinking light that had stolen my sleep, and she filmed the second device under the sofa, capturing every angle, every flicker, every number printed along the side. She explained how the sound was timed, how it would trigger even if I was resting, and as she spoke, I felt a soft trembling inside me, not of fear, but of recognition. The truth had always been there, humming like a trapped insect, and now she was holding it in her hands. Shane gathered everything into a single document, listing each piece with careful precision. Evidence of mental harassment, evidence of forged medical files, evidence of drugging through hidden pills. evidence of trespassing inside my home, evidence of elder abuse, the phrase that sliced deepest, because it was the one I had tried hardest not to believe. He told me that each category would help build the case, and as he spoke, I imagined him sitting at his desk, sorting through the chaos Emma had created, turning it into something clear and sharp. They saved everything in multiple places because they knew how easily a phone could disappear or be destroyed. They uploaded the videos to a secure drive, sent a copy to Shane's law office, sent another to Hannah's email with a one-time password. Hearing that level of protection made me feel for the first time in weeks as if the ground beneath me had stopped shifting. Then came the new security footage from the neighbors. They had two more clips. One showed Emma tossing the empty packaging from the device into their trash can. Her movements quick, almost careless, as if she thought no one would ever look. The other showed her walking along the sidewalk during a phone call, her voice low, her steps impatient. The neighbors said they could only hear one clear line. She said, "It is almost done." Those words clung to me long after Shane repeated them. He added those clips to the timeline he was building, marking each moment Emma crossed into cruelty, and he told me that soon she would be summoned. Hearing that, I closed my eyes and let my shoulders soften. For so long, she controlled the story. Now the story was finally turning back toward the truth. I did not understand the full reach of Emma's intentions until Hannah sat beside my hospital bed one afternoon and told me what she had discovered on my laptop. The moment she said she had opened my email inbox, I felt a sting of embarrassment run through me, as if Emma had managed to crawl even deeper into my private life than I ever imagined. Hannah said she found a message sent to my bank, polite and formal, asking for information about something called financial power of attorney. As she spoke, my heart sank slowly, because I knew I had never written anything like that. The request asked for guidance on transferring financial authority to Mason. It used my name, my email, and even adopted the tone I used when dealing with the bank. Hearing that made my fingers curl into the blanket. It was like listening to someone imitate my voice from the inside of my own home. The bank had replied, stating they needed a mental capacity evaluation before beginning such a process. Hannah told me that when she read that line, she felt something snap into place like a puzzle piece we had not known we were missing. It explained so much. The sudden urgency Emma had shown when the doctor she bribed drafted that false psychiatric evaluation. The way she pushed to have me removed from my house at the exact moment the bank asked for proof of my mental state. Her plan had been moving toward one target all along: my money. When Hannah told Shane, he contacted the bank directly. He later recounted the conversation to me, and the details were enough to make my breath grow shallow. The bank confirmed that an appointment had already been scheduled under my name for a behavioral capacity verification, something they only require when someone wants to hand over financial control. The appointment had been set for the very week I was dragged into the ambulance. After my admission, the appointment was canceled, not by Emma, but by the bank, because an active psychiatric evaluation automatically freezes such procedures. The timing fit too perfectly to be chance. But the part that broke me the most was Mason. He had no idea any of this was happening. Shane showed him the email where Emma pretended to be me. Hannah later told me how pale he became when he saw it, how he sat down as if the chair had been pulled from under him. He kept asking, how could she do this? His voice cracking in a way I had not heard since he was a boy. For so long, he clung to the belief that his wife was helping me. He wanted so badly to be a good son that he let her guide him blindfolded toward exactly what she wanted. He thought he was protecting me, but he had unknowingly been helping her strip away everything I had earned over a lifetime. As Hannah described the moment he realized this, I felt something complicated rise in my chest, a mix of sorrow and relief. Sorrow because my son had been twisted into believing I was fading. Relief because he finally saw the truth. Emma had never wanted to care for me. She wanted to own me. And now, for the first time, Mason understood that too. I remember the morning the door of that place finally trembled. I was sitting on the narrow bed, holding my hands together as if they were the only anchor I had left. For weeks, I had lived in a fog of fear and confusion, wondering if the world outside had forgotten me. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway, louder and quicker than usual, followed by voices that did not belong to nurses. Something in me lifted its head like a trapped animal sensing a crack of light. I heard my name spoken in a firm, steady voice, and I recognized it even before I saw him. It was Shane. His tone carried a weight I had not heard since I was taken from my home. A second voice followed, sharp and familiar, and my heart burst upward when I realized it was Hannah. I moved toward the bars of the door, afraid to hope, afraid I might be imagining them the same way Emma always claimed I imagined sounds. The hallway filled with uniformed officers. Their presence brought a strange mix of terror and relief. One of them announced they were here under a writ, a word I did not fully understand, but I felt its force in the way the staff stiffened and stepped back. Later, Shane explained it was a writ of habeas corpus, something powerful enough to demand answers and force locked doors to open. At that moment, I only saw the shock on the nurses' faces and the tremor in the hands of the doctor who had signed my supposed evaluation. I watched the officers lead Shane and Hannah to that doctor. I could hear fragments of the confrontation drifting toward me. Questions about signatures that did not match. A statement from an officer saying he had compared the signature on my file with the official one on record, and they were not the same. The doctor gave halting answers, stumbling over every word. The staff around them whispered, and fear began to thicken in the air like smoke. Shane demanded the internal camera footage. I could hear the clicking of the keyboard and the uneasy silence that followed. Then the officers watched the screen. One of them said he saw no hint of aggression in my behavior, and another nodded as if everything they had been told about me was dissolving before their eyes. The doctor looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff he never meant to reach. Then came the command that changed everything. Open the door, just that calm and direct. The key turned in the lock, slow at first, as if the staff still hoped someone would stop them. When the door finally swung open, the hallway beyond looked wider than I remembered, and there she was. Hannah. Her face wet with tears and disbelief. She rushed toward me, and my legs shook so violently I had to hold the doorframe for balance. She caught me with both arms, gripping me as if she feared I might vanish again. I felt her breath on my shoulder and heard her murmur that she was here. She had me. She would not let them touch me again. Behind her, a nurse whispered an apology with her head bowed. I barely heard her. My world had narrowed to the warmth of my sister's hands and the realization that I was finally being pulled out of the nightmare Emma had built for me. For the first time in weeks, the air tasted real. The moment I stepped out of the holding room, still shaking from everything that had happened, I saw Emma rushing down the hallway as if she had rehearsed it. She covered her face with both hands, letting out loud, trembling sobs, but there was not a single tear on her cheeks. She cried out that the officers should not scare her mother any further, claiming I was too fragile and easily panicked. I stood there watching her, amazed at how quickly she could perform when she thought she still owned the room. One of the officers tilted his head, studying her with a calm suspicion. He said he found it interesting how comfortable she looked inside a psychiatric ward, as if she knew her way around it a little too well. The color drained from her face so quickly, I almost felt the temperature drop. Mason stood a few steps behind her, torn, between all of us confusion tightening his expression. He looked at Shane first, asking why he was here and what was happening to his mother. Before Shane could answer, Emma jumped in as if she feared the truth might slip out if she did not speak fast enough. She told Mason not to listen to anyone because I was suffering from severe delusions. Mason turned toward me, then searching my face for some sign of instability. I stood still, breathing slowly, my eyes clear, and for the first time, he looked uncertain about his wife's words. I could see it, the crack forming in the wall Emma had built around him. A woman in a patient gown stood nearby, someone I had spoken to only twice during my stay. She leaned toward a nurse and whispered that Emma was exaggerating everything and that I had been perfectly normal the entire time. I watched the nurse's eyes narrow slightly as she absorbed the comment. It was a tiny shift, just a small flicker of doubt, but I felt it ripple through the room. People were beginning to see Emma the way I had seen her for months. While an officer tried to calm Emma, she suddenly froze. Her gaze darted toward Shane, who was quietly opening his leather case. She knew that case held the end of her story. I saw it in the stiffening of her shoulders, in the way her breath hitched. She grabbed Mason's wrist and tried to pull him aside, murmuring something desperate and low. But Mason did not move. His feet stayed planted, his eyes fixed on Shane, as if he finally wanted answers instead of reassurances. I stood there watching the shift, the slow collapse of Emma's control. For so long, she had manipulated every minute, every word, every shadow in my home. Yet here she was now, shrinking in a hallway, where she could not direct the scene, where her voice no longer guided the narrative. The truth was stepping in piece by piece, and she could feel it tightening around her. And I realized for the first time since this nightmare began that she was afraid. I stood near the wall, my hands trembling lightly, while Shane stepped forward with the calm certainty of a man who knew the truth was finally on his side. He placed his case on the table, opened it slowly, and for a moment, the entire room grew quiet, as if everyone was holding their breath at once. Emma shifted beside Mason, her fingers twisting together, her eyes darting from Shane to the officers as if she could still outrun what was coming. Shane began with the simplest thing. He pressed play on a video Hannah had recorded. The sound burst through the speakers with a clarity that made the hairs on my arms lift. The tapping, the soft scraping, the exact pattern that had stolen my sleep for weeks. In the middle of the room, those noises sounded almost harmless, but to me, they were the echoes of nights when I thought I was losing my mind. One of the officers leaned in closer, and he said it was obviously a timed device. His tone held no doubt. Emma let out a sob so dramatic it startled even Mason, but tears still refused to appear on her cheeks. She cried that she did not know anything, but her voice cracked in a place that revealed she knew this performance was failing. Shane continued without pausing. He laid out 2 printed receipts, slid them across the table, and pointed to the signatures. They matched the man Emma had met in the parking lot. Then he held up the Ring camera footage from the neighbor's porch. The video clearly showed Emma handing over an envelope and receiving a small black bag in return. Inside that bag were the drugs and the devices that had torn my sanity apart. Shane explained that the substances in the receipts were dimenhydrinate and melatonin in dangerously high doses, enough to impair cognition when used repeatedly. He stated calmly that such tampering with an elder's mental state was considered a felony. The officer beside him nodded slowly, his eyes sliding toward Emma with growing certainty. Then Shane lifted an iPad and tapped the screen. My heart clenched as messages filled the display, magnified so the entire room could read them. Messages where Emma told Mason I wanted to hit her. Messages where she claimed I no longer recognized her. messages where she wrote that only a few more days were needed and everything would be complete. Mason stared at them as if they were written in a language he had never seen before. One of the officers looked straight at him and asked if he understood now that his wife had planned everything from the beginning. Mason did not answer. His face said more than words could. Finally, Shane pulled out the document that had sealed my fate weeks earlier. The falsified medical file. The moment he held it up, the doctor standing beside him went rigid. Sweat gathered at the doctor's hairline as he stared at the signature on the page, a signature that was supposed to be his, a signature that was nothing like the one on the hospital's official forms. An officer spoke softly into his radio, requesting immediate authorization to collect medical evidence and summon the primary suspect for questioning. Emma's legs buckled. I saw her grab the edge of a chair, her breath shallow, her face drained of every ounce of defiance she once wielded, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the ground steady beneath my feet again. I had barely caught my breath when Hannah stepped forward. She did not move with anger or panic. She moved with purpose, calm and sharp as a blade. I watched her shoulders rise and square themselves, and in that moment, she seemed taller than anyone in the room. Her voice cut through the hallway with a clarity that made even the officers stop shifting their feet. She pointed straight at Emma, and I felt something inside me steady when I heard her speak. She said that the person who placed the noise devices was Emma. She said that the person who mixed the drugs into my food was Emma. She said the forged medical file came from Emma. Then she said the words that made my knees soften. She said Emma had planned to steal the home my husband worked his whole life to leave me. Hearing those truths spoken out loud made the air feel charged. It was as if every secret I had carried for months came spilling into the light all at once. The nurses standing nearby pulled closer together, their eyes wide, whispering behind their hands. One of them even lifted a phone as if afraid this might be the kind of case people get fired for ignoring. Two officers stepped toward Emma as soon as the word property echoed through the hallway. I knew why. In this country, elder abuse tied to financial exploitation is treated as one of the worst crimes, and Hannah had just named it for everyone to hear. But she was not finished. She told them that I was never unstable, that Emma wanted Mason to believe I was losing my mind so she could gain control of my accounts. The shift in the room was immediate. Every pair of eyes turned to Mason. He looked as if something inside him crumpled. His face drained of color, and he stared at Hannah as though her words struck him physically. I saw the guilt rise in him thick and choking, the kind that men in this country carry heavily when they realize they failed to protect their mothers. Emma snapped then. Her voice tore out in a scream, accusing Hannah of lying. It was shrill and desperate, nothing like the gentle tone she used in front of Mason. But before she could say more, Shane lifted his tablet and played a video that froze every sound in the hallway. There she was. Emma, standing in my kitchen. Her face twisted with irritation. She threw a towel to the floor, stepped closer to me, and hissed words meant to provoke. Then she pulled out her phone and angled it just right to catch my reaction. Watching it again, surrounded by officers, nurses, and my son, made me feel both sick and vindicated. Her entire act crumbled in seconds. One of the officers lifted his hand toward his partner, a silent signal that said everything. Hold her. Do not let her leave. Emma's eyes widened as two officers closed in from both sides, and she stumbled back as if the ground had turned to water. And I stood there watching the truth finally reach her faster than she could run. I watched Mason take the tablet from Shane with hands that already trembled. He held it tightly at first, as if bracing himself, then pressed play. The room grew quiet, so quiet, I could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above us. On the screen, Emma appeared in my kitchen, the morning light behind her, casting long shadows across the counter. Her voice was sharp cold, nothing like the soft tone she used in front of Mason. She stepped toward me in the video, pushing a towel off the counter to startle me, leaning in close, whispering words meant only to ignite my temper. I saw Mason's shoulders tense the moment he realized what he was watching. In the video, Emma said that all she needed was for me to raise my voice, that one small outburst would be enough. Hearing that made his breath catch. His lips trembled as he watched her sneak her phone up just enough to frame me, her expression shifting instantly from irritation to fear, a fear she pretended to have in order to make me look dangerous. The tablet slipped from Mason's hands and clattered onto the floor. He did not even look down at it. His eyes were fixed on Emma, wide and hollow, like something inside him had cracked open. He took a step back from her, then another, as if the woman standing in front of him were a stranger who had just stepped out of a darker world. He asked her what she had done, his voice unsteady and thin. Emma reached for him, but he pulled his arm away sharply, the movement so quick she froze mid-step. That was the moment she understood she had lost him for good. One of the officers stepped forward and began reciting the Miranda warning with a steady calmness. He addressed her formally, stating she was under arrest for elder abuse, falsifying medical documents, and attempting to seize assets through deception. Emma's scream tore through the hallway. She cried for Mason, insisted she had done it for their future, for their life together, for him. But Mason did not move. He stood rooted to the ground, staring at her, like every memory they shared had just collapsed into ashes. I felt my tears fall before I even realized I was crying. Mason turned toward me, then his face breaking apart. The guilt pouring through him so strongly, it seemed to shake his entire body. He came to me slowly, as if afraid I might disappear if he moved too fast. When he reached me, he wrapped his arms around me and whispered an apology through a voice cracked with sorrow. He said it was his fault, that he should have seen the truth, that he had failed me without even realizing it. I held him, my own hands trembling not out of fear, but from the weight finally lifting off my chest. Hannah stepped closer and wrapped her arms around us both, creating a circle that felt like the first breath of safety in a very long time. For a moment, the hospital hallway felt still, filled with heartbreak and relief, all tangled together. It was the truest climax of everything we had endured, a breaking, a release, a beginning. I watched them lead Emma away. Her wrists bound her steps, stumbling as if she had finally felt the full weight of everything she had done. The hallway echoed with the sharp click of police shoes, a rhythm that felt strangely steady in my chest. For months, my life had been shaped by fear, doubt, and the feeling that my own mind was slipping away. Now, the woman who planted that terror was the one losing control. The officers informed her that she was under arrest for elder abuse, mental health endangerment, and falsifying medical documents. The words washed through the room like a cold wind, and I felt something inside me loosen, almost like a knot, slowly untying after too many nights pulled tight. Mason stood beside me, silent and broken. His face was still wet from tears he had not wiped away. He kept looking at the floor as if he could not bear to face the world yet. Then he turned toward me and whispered an apology that trembled with pain. I could tell he was grieving not only what had happened to me, but also the part of himself he had lost by trusting the wrong person. He said he had been blind for too long, that he should have seen it, that he failed to protect his own mother. I laid my hand on his cheek and told him that what happened was not his fault. The truth is, I could see the boy he once was in that moment, the boy who always wanted to do right, and my heart ached for him more than for myself. Shane stood nearby, already preparing for the next battle. He said he would help me file civil claims against Emma for damages and for the lies she had spread. He wanted the law to restore more than my freedom. He wanted it to restore my dignity. Listening to him speak so firmly made me realize that justice did not end with her arrest. It had only just begun. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen. I felt believed. News of Emma's crimes spread faster than I expected. Her family refused to take her in once the charges became public. They said she had embarrassed them, that she had always chased the wrong things, that they wanted no part in her mess. She lost her job the next morning. The company released a statement saying they did not tolerate fraud or elder exploitation. The online accounts she had used to paint herself as the perfect daughter-in-law went silent, then disappeared. The image she built with filters and practiced smiles collapsed like sand underwater. But the final twist came a few days later. The police tracked down the man Emma had met in the parking lot. He had been arrested for selling illegal electronic devices. When questioned, he admitted everything. He said Emma paid him for the noise machines, for unregistered pills, and for his silence. He confessed she told him she needed the items to make someone look unstable. Hearing that confession felt like the last missing piece from a nightmare puzzle. It confirmed every dark corner Emma had tried to hide. I sat on my porch that evening, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sky darken into a soft blue. For the first time in months, the silence around me felt like peace instead of fear. Karma had not come loudly. It came precisely step by step until there was nowhere left for her to run. When I finally walked back into my house, the air felt different. It was the same space, the same walls, the same kitchen where I once stood trembling at sounds no one else could hear, yet everything felt new. Hannah had insisted on staying with me for a while. She said she wanted to help me settle back into my life, but I knew the truth. She did not want me to spend a single night alone in a place that had been turned into a battlefield. I let her take the guest room. Hearing her footsteps in the hallway brought me a comfort I had not felt in months. Each morning, she brewed coffee and opened the curtains wide, as if pulling light back into my home. She sorted through my mail, cleaned out the cupboards where Emma once moved things just enough to make me doubt myself, and sat with me at the dining table when memories rose too sharply. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we stayed quiet. Healing rarely comes loudly. It comes in slow breaths, in the presence of someone who loves you without condition. Mason began coming by almost every day. He moved into a rental a few blocks away, even though his commute would be longer. He said he wanted to be close in case I needed anything. The first afternoon, he arrived with a toolbox and went straight to the backyard to repair the old fence. I watched him through the window, the way his shoulders lifted and fell with the weight of the boards, the way he kept wiping his face, as if sweat and sorrow mixed together. Later, he cooked dinner for us. He chopped vegetables slowly, carefully, as if every movement was a promise to be better than the son he believed he had been. He apologized again. I told him again that some wounds belong to more than one person, and that it was time for both of us to breathe. At night, I wrote in my journal, the one place where my thoughts had always stayed steady, even when my world did not. I wrote that aging did not mean weakness. I wrote that growing older meant you learned to sense danger the way others sensed weather, that you learned how to listen to the small shifts in a house you knew by heart. I wrote that survival sometimes begins with noticing the faintest change in your own kitchen. One quiet afternoon, I opened the drawer beside my bed and found the little piece of paper Hannah once slipped into my coat. I held it between my fingers, feeling the crease from the night she wrote the numbers down. That scrap had saved my life. It was simple, worn barely larger than a receipt, yet it carried the proof that I had not been alone, not even in the darkest hours. I sat there with the paper resting in my palm, and a soft smile rose without effort. Justice had arrived in its own time, steady and sure. But I found myself wondering about something deeper. Whether justice makes a person happy, or whether it only allows them to take their first full breath after surviving a nightmare. If you have ever faced betrayal, manipulation, or moments when your voice was ignored, your story matters. Sharing it may give strength to someone who is living through the same silence right now. Your words could be the light that shows another woman she is not alone, that her pain is real, and that her truth deserves to be heard. Tell your story. Let it travel. Let it remind others that courage grows each time one of us speaks.